Good afternoon. I thought it was interesting that the Republicans had a press conference this morning to talk about the failure of their filibuster, but here we are. Republicans are engaged in an obvious filibuster to prevent a vote on the Equal Rights Amendment and also to keep the majority from finishing the work of the session. They have talked about it casually with our members. Operation Talk Till Midnight is well underway, and they've been high-fiving at midnight on Monday. In addition, they conditioned their report or their support for a state infrastructure bill on our agreeing not to do the Equal Rights Amendment. And Minnesota Democrats are just not going to negotiate away Minnesotans' civil rights for a few construction projects. This is a really important measure to lots of Minnesotans. It's super important to the House DFL caucus. It's very important to the Senate DFL caucus, and we will take it up. The Equal Rights Amendment was initially scheduled for floor action for Monday. Instead of doing that on Monday, the Republicans filibustered a motion to accept a conference committee report on junk fees, a bill that many of them eventually voted for after 8 hours and 5 minutes of debate, pushing it off. The Equal Rights Amendment was again scheduled for Wednesday, and again, Republican filibustering prevented us from taking up that measure. On Wednesday, they talked about the Paid Family Medical Leave Act Conference Committee report for 7.5 hours, or I'm sorry, more than 8 hours, when passage of the bill, setting up the program, took less time than that. This pattern of debate is out of the norm for them and is pursuant to a stated strategy to prevent a vote on the Equal Rights Amendment. The measure that they debated for 7 hours on Monday passed with broad bipartisan support. Many of the members who had spent the longest filibustering that bill ended up voting for it. Minnesotans sent us here to deliver. We will deliver. We'll get the work done. The minority absolutely has a right to be heard. 8 hours was a full debate on the Paid Family Medical Leave technical bill. But just as the rules provide that the minority has a right to be heard, the rules of the House also provide that the majority has the right and the responsibility to govern. So at a point when every speech is for a dilatory purpose, every speech is out of order, and we needed to go to a vote, and we did.
So I just wanted to add that we have seen a long and ugly history in this country of filibustering of civil rights bills. This is not new. This is something that we saw at the federal level when the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was up for being passed. It was one of the longest, if not the longest, filibuster in U.S. history. And it took Hubert Humphrey, our Minnesota senator, to break that filibuster and get us to a vote. And it took Speaker Hortman last night to break the filibuster so that we can move forward and get to a vote on Equal Rights Amendment on Friday. So we know why they want to do this. They're trying to prevent equal rights, civil rights, from going on the ballot in front of the Minnesota public and letting the Minnesota public choose whether they want these protections in the Constitution. We know overwhelmingly they do from public polling. We know that these are protections that people believe strongly in, feel deeply in. It is for Minnesotans not a tough question about whether they want protections for their equal rights established in the Constitution. It only seems to be a tough question up here with the GOP about opposing the work that we're doing. But we're getting our work done, and we're doing important things for Minnesotans. We're taking action on gun violence prevention. We're taking action on affordable housing. We're working on great education bill that we were able to get across the floor last night. So we're doing our work, and they're not going to be able to prevent Equal Rights Amendment from getting in front of the Minnesota public.
And let me also just say that there are many, many reasons to adjourn at midnight, and it has been the practice of the House under my leadership to adjourn at midnight. Part of the reason we do that is one of our members almost died in a car accident driving home after a late night session. I want to say that was around 2013. And you look at what's happening over in the Senate and going until 5:30 in the morning. We would have had the same results if we stayed till 5:30 in the morning. But we would have put a lot of people in danger, not just driving home, but personal health risks. You know, not every state representative and state senator is ready to go out for the Olympics. There are a lot of reasons to stop at midnight, and so that is what we did. Questions?
Not that many people outside this building care about the rules, but what you did was outside the rules, couldn't you have just had someone move to the previous question, gotten 15 votes, and then immediately gone to the vote on that bill?
No, it wasn't not permitted under the rules. In fact, the rules of the House and of Masons and the customs and usage require that the speaker maintains control over the body. And at that moment in time, when I came back to the chamber at about 5 to midnight, you know, I just talked to Leader Damath in the hallway outside, and I said, so we're gonna wrap this PFML by midnight. And she said yes. And I walk in the chamber, and there's 30 Republicans standing up waiting to be recognized. Well, that was clearly dilatory. That was clearly to test and see if we're going after midnight. Nobody is in order when the purpose for which they are rising is to delay the work of the House.
Does the ERA have the votes in the Senate yet?
Yes.
To pass? It does.
Yes,
When will you take that up tomorrow?
tomorrow.
First bill?
I think it will be the first bill.
How will you prevent what's happened in the past few nights to happen tomorrow?
We have the tools. I mean, we have the tools of going to the vote. We have the tools of moving the previous question. And in legislative bodies all across the country, they have the same rule. And it is rarely used because typically majorities and minorities respect the democratic process, which is for both sides to articulate their point of view and for them there to be a vote and for there to be a result. And sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. It's pretty rare to have folks lay down on the railroad tracks. I know our side certainly considered it in 2012 when the Republicans were putting the anti-marriage equality amendment on the ballot. We talked about, I think we had 65 members at the time. We talked about, can we do a 65-hour filibuster? You know, because this is really hateful. And there's gonna be gay kids who feel less than because of this debate. But instead, we had a respectful debate. I think you could hear a pin drop during that debate. And we made our points, and it was a reasonable amount of time, and we accepted that we were going to lose the vote, and we took the fight out to the voters.
Leader Damon said that everything is at risk now because of what happened last night. Do you agree with that? Is bonding at risk, Uber, Lyft?
Well, I think the bonding discussions weren't going that great anyway. At the legislature, it's always darkest before the dawn, but first it has to get pitch black. Sometimes Republicans engage in activities to bring it to pitch black. I'm sure it contributed a little bit to the shading last night. But I don't think ultimately that it will have a big impact. This is something that always happens at the end of session. Whether it's us in charge, whether it's the Republicans in charge, it's very tense. People are exhausted. Everything comes down to the last few days. There's the entire session's worth of work in like 10 to 20 conference committee reports. And so these kind of tense blow-ups happen and don't necessarily have an impact on whether there's ultimately a deal or not. I think last year the bonding deal was reached at like 3 a.m, 2 days before we adjourned.
It sounds like you guys are okay with trading, I think you said a couple of infrastructure projects for the ERA. I mean, if it comes down to that, is that?
Not okay. We will never trade infrastructure projects against Minnesotans' civil rights. We absolutely will not bargain on that.
You guys have always been a little bit more optimistic on whether the Senate was going to take this language. You were more hopeful, I think. You seem to be pretty definitive a couple minutes ago. What's changed?
Senator Murphy and her caucus was it Monday, had a pretty intensive caucus to make the final determination of would they accept the language that we were sending and would they put it on the ballot. And they made the determination that they were united and they were ready for it.
Just to clarify.
As is, or will the amendments, the religion, add back in, any other amendments you'll be making on the floor for them to accept it, or they'll accept it
No,
as is?
They're ready to take it as is.
Just to clarify my question.
Sorry.
No, you're good. If it comes down to passing one or the other is what I meant. The ERA is the one that you guys are going to go with.
Absolutely. You know, I think it's very clear that Republicans have a hard time expanding civil rights to include LGBTQ folks, particularly trans folks. And we live in a society where trans folks face danger every single day. I think in Minnesota, we saw this dramatically with the beating at the Metro Transit stop by US Bank Stadium. And it's time for us to expand civil rights clearly in our Constitution to include everyone. And the Republicans may want to fight that, but we are just as determined, if not more, to fight for it.
They made a big fuss about a lot of these bills going through rules instead of like all of the committees.
How do you respond to that?
Constitutional amendments go through rules.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're referring to the Equal Rights Amendment, it did have a hearing in committees last year. And then we had the Senate send over a version that the House couldn't accept. That sent it back to Rules. Rules is the committee of jurisdiction for constitutional amendments, and we had a hearing on Representative Herr's bill.
At what point do we run out of time to hammer out differences between the House and Senate versions of the bill?
Sunday at midnight.
So do you, if you take up ERA tomorrow, and if precedent is anything, that they will take a long time to debate that, if a lot of amendments, I mean, do you want to gamble on like risking anything else for that? Like, I mean, because they could burn through a whole day unless I get you invoke some of the tools you mentioned.
Yeah, we have the tools to get the entire agenda done. So I don't think anything has to be risked or sacrificed to do ERA, except perhaps a bonding bill. If Republicans are conditioning their support for a bonding bill on denying civil rights to trans Minnesotans, then we won't have a bonding bill. Yeah.
What's going to be the threshold for shutting down debate? Let's say the House convenes on Friday and we start to see something play out like what we saw yesterday. I mean, at what point are you going to use the tool that you used last night to move things along?
We'll make sure they have a full and fair opportunity to debate everything. We've got records of how long conference committees are typically debated. Typically, a conference committee is an hour or less. We'll make sure that they have a full and fair opportunity to debate all of those bills. And the ERA, because it's a constitutional amendment, deserves some time on the floor. It deserves a few hours, probably in the 4 to 6 hour range. So, but at a certain point, it's very obvious when Republicans are filibustering. I mean, I don't know how many of you tuned in on Monday, but there was a lot of conversation about cheeseburgers. I understand also hamburgers, maybe French fries. I know the folks in the gallery said they were hungry, they were gonna all head out and get burgers. That's not what the voters of the state of Minnesota engage in an election to do, and elect 134 representatives to come to the state capitol in St. Paul to debate policies that are of interest to the people of the state of Minnesota. They are not expecting that we are using this gigantic expenditure of public resources and all the nonpartisan staff to talk about hamburgers and French fries when their local water treatment plants need to be fixed and their local roads and their bridges need to be fixed, and fundamental human rights are on the agenda. I think that Republicans have shown complete disrespect, not just to Democrats, but to the Minnesotans who expect us to do work. Hundreds of people came here on Monday to see the ERA debate. Yet there have been people here very many times to see the RCV debate. The African American Family Preservation folks in the gallery was utterly amazing to watch them watch the Republicans filibuster. And you could just read the faces of like, are these people serious? So I don't think that's what Minnesotans sent us here to do, is to be petty, to be silly, to act like this is a game. They want us to debate. We certainly have differences. It's not personal. We should professionally debate the issues and then move to a vote.
How does Uber and Lyft fit into the final picture? You got that July 1st deadline. Is that headed to a special session?
No, we're working in good faith. We're meeting with the drivers, meeting with the companies, and we're trying to get to a deal. But we know why we're doing this, which is that we have drivers that are being unfairly compensated right now. That's what the study showed from the Department of Labor and Industry, that they're not being paid minimum wages. So we need to fix that. That's what drivers have been telling us. So we're working hard to make sure that we're getting the wages that we need to protect drivers and that we can have these important services for Minnesotans.
Are you any closer on a rate that Uber and Lyft say that they will stay in the state for?
We're having really good conversations with drivers and with Uber and Lyft. No announcements for today, but we're having good conversations.
Given everything else that remains, is it, how about sports betting and or HHR, the HHR ban? How's that looking at this point?
HHR we will for sure do, because that does not require bipartisan support, and the action that the Racing Commission took was unlawful. The sports betting deal hinges on Republican support. So really, the Republicans will decide whether the state of Minnesota has a bonding bill this year, and they will decide whether sports betting is successful or not. We would love to work on those pieces of legislation with Republicans if they have an appetite for that. so far they've had some really good conversations on sports betting. And, similarly, in most of the conference committees, typically in the House and the Senate, a person has to vote for a bill in order to be on a conference committee. But out of courtesy, I have put Republicans who didn't vote for bills on almost every single conference committee until Monday, when I'm done with Republican baloney. And they have participated. They have been in these open conference committee meetings. They have offered amendments. They're there. They're in the conversation. I hope that instead of engaging in more filibusters, I hope we'll take the energy from hamburgers and french fries and cheeseburger conversations and put that energy instead into having actual real conversations with each other about how we might be able to change bills to make them more happier.
The sports betting bill that's on the calendar right now, wasn't it an amendment to the horse racing issue, and Republicans, I think, reject that? So are you saying Republicans support the bill as it stands, or you need their support to pass it as it stands?
We need their support to pass the full sports betting bill. We don't need their, we have a separate vehicle for that.
Okay, so you're saying if you just pass that separately? If they don't, okay.
So you're saying ERA can come up, you're expecting ERA to come up first on the House floor tomorrow?
I am.
Is there a chance then that the Senate could take it up on the Senate floor tomorrow, or would the earliest be the next day?
It will sound very sarcastic if I ask you this question, but have you been here this week? I don't think if we take it up tomorrow that the Senate will get it tomorrow. I think the earliest the Senate will get it is on Saturday.
So you think the vote would need to concur in the Senate?
Correct.
What's your pro tem bullpen look like if you're going to have Representative Herr on the floor during the ERA debate? Do you have plenty of people to stand in up there?
I do. I have a great set of pro tem. Sam Vang is extraordinary. I think they're almost done with the Ag Conference Committee agreement. Kelly Moeller, Liz Olson, Brad Tabke. So plenty of folks to stand in.
Any regrets about removing the mute button?
There was a moment last night where I could not hear Pat Murphy, but I knew what he was saying, so it didn't actually matter if I heard him or not.
Well, Speaker, is this a Minnesota thing? I mean, other states have speech limits. Congress
Correct.
sets time. Why?
Right?
is
Go ahead,
Minnesota's
Jamie.
tradition-
Can I just say right here, right now, for all of you, he was right. We should have put time limits in the rules. Go ahead.
Were you proposing that at the start of session?
I was, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so Representative Pulowski is the master on this, and he had a very thorough vetting of our House rules several sessions ago with the Select Committee on process. And we had the National Conference and State Legislators come out and review our House process, and they called it the Wild West. They said it was out of the norm for essentially any other chamber in the country. We're more akin to the US Senate and the House than any other chamber. So that means that we have essentially unlimited ability for the minority to take the actions that they did with some of the constraints that we put in place. And that is not the norm in other chambers. Other chambers have time limits for debate. They negotiate those between the majority and the minority. Frankly, if I were in the minority, I would prefer that too, because you can, the incentives, if you're in the minority, are to take it to the extreme, to use all of the tools you have. And if you actually agree to debate limits, I think that is a healthier environment for everybody, and that's how almost every other chamber in the country does it.
But the Speaker vetoed that. Why?
I did, and you know why I did? Because Leader Dameth was a new leader, and she said, give us a chance. And I said, relationships are more important than rules, and let's give them a chance, and let's give her a chance.
Representative Long, why did you introduce an amendment to the Uber Lyft bill getting rid of the pay rates?
So the amendment that I filed today is got technical agreements that we've worked through with the companies, and then it has a dotted line for the pay rates right now. So it's not getting rid of them, it's just acknowledging that we're still working with drivers and companies to reach agreement.
But what happens to the $1.27? Why isn't that in statute anymore?
Well, if that's where we can reach agreement, that's where we'll land. That's certainly the position that we've taken in from the legislature. And so we're working hard to get to a place where we can agree.
So do you amend the amendment if you have the deal?
That's the idea.
Okay.
Can you pass a bill without any rates in it?
We could from the House. I think enacting a law without rates would probably not happen.
At what point do you expect this, is the vote on these technical amendments, are you just gonna keep working through tomorrow's floor activities and then like, as the bills get reconciled through the weekend, is that when you would expect a deal to come together? Or like, is it possible you could have a deal tomorrow and you could put in
That's the
those
hope.
numbers?
We're trying to get, to see if we can reach a deal tomorrow. That's certainly the plan.
What's the number that you're talking about now?
Oh, I can't share. We're
Oh, you
working.
can share. You can
We're
share.
working
The governor
hard.
said $1.21. I mean, like, he keeps pointing to this range, so can you get in the range? Can you get $1.21? Can you get $1.20?
I do believe it, we are working really well with the governor's office. The governor's office has done a very comprehensive study on what a fair set of rates are. And I do believe that we're gonna be able to reach agreement.
Would you need Republican votes for the range that the governor has outlined?
I don't think so, but we're still working towards a deal.
How much did the fact that you have the majorities now factor into this decision to say, we'll do ERA and we won't trade it for bonding, because you can do bonding potentially next year if you still have control? I mean, was that part of it?
We did a record-setting bonding bill in 2020, and we did 2.6 billion last year. I think we had another large bonding bill in 2022, if memory serves. And so we have done a lot of capital investment. It's really important, though. The state of Minnesota owns a lot of assets, and it is just purely and simply a responsibility of state leaders to take care of our assets. So it shouldn't be used as this big bargaining chip. I think that, you know, when the Republicans had their press conference on Monday and Senator Johnson talked about the filibuster that Republicans were engaged in, I just think that's a really inappropriate use of the bonding bill. You know, when I was the minority leader in 17 and 18, that's not how we did it. I fought for a $15 million steam plant in Duluth. And when we got that, I said, yes, we got a deal, let's do a bill. But it's grown into this momentous thing where I think they feel like they're supposed to have some gigantic win other than investing in wastewater treatment plants all over the state and roads and bridges and our higher education institutions. That's the win, you know. So on the offer sheet that they keep sliding to us that says, you know, bullet point at the bottom, no ERA, no public option, I kind of want to put the numbers that we've got, which is 930 GO, 24 million in cash, 26 million in cash, 30 million EMS, and then bullet point, the satisfaction of a job well done, because this is our responsibility to the people that we serve.
Says that you also aren't willing to budge on the money.
Well, I don't think the money is the problem for them. I think they want some other win. So we could just talk about money. I think that their caucus is at 9:30, and the 9:30 bill is written. So as we get later and later, I mean, certainly 3 weeks ago, we could have had a deal, and their folks and our folks could have written a bill together. As it was, they won't give their folks permission to work with our folks, so we have a $930 million bill drafted. The later we get, the harder it is to cut that thing down, because as we saw last year, when they came to the table finally at like 3 a.m, 2 days before we adjourned, the bill had tons of errors. One of our first bills this year was to correct all the errors. So if they want to go down to like 867, for why is my question? Because at this point in time, if they start at the 930 base and they add in the Republican projects, the bill can come together, and the bill can come together without errors.
Did I hear you write the EMS as part of the bonding bill?
Well, it's part of our negotiations. I've always said, just like last year, we had a certain big pile of money for capital investment, and we were willing to spend some of it on capital investment and some of it on nursing homes. And the question was proportionality, right? And so all the money that got spent on nursing homes came out of the capital investment budget, bucket. This year, the bucket is big enough to include cash for the bonding bill and cash for EMS. We initially proposed 16 million for EMS. We were in line with the governor. That is the budget agreement between the leaders. But we have 40 million for capital investment. So we have 56 million total. And right now, where we are in negotiations is 20-something for capital investment and 30-something for EMS. And I think that's where Republicans and Democrats are aligned.
Which conference reports are farthest from completion right now, or running into the biggest issues aligning?
I think almost everything is done. I think the last one always to close is taxes. Health is pretty complex. HHS is a little bit complex. And then I think ag and energy is dangerously close to wrapping, as is jobs.
Pensions got done.
On the ERA, why not, like, why didn't you guys do something on it sooner this session in terms of trying to move it off the floor. Representative Herr, maybe you can speak to like hashing out the language. Was that the holdup or?
Well, I would say that we have been ready. I mean, we worked a lot in the interim after last session and really hearing our caucus and who they represent to say what is missing from the ERA. And so we were ready right away at the beginning of February when we came back. It's the courtesy that we wanted to offer our Senate colleagues because our language was different, and we wanted to give the time to sort of work through where they might see differences and how we were going to move it forward together. And so really it was because we were trying to be very collaborative in the process.
The language in the DE amendment that reflects the current language that has the pregnancy provisions as opposed to reproductive freedom, which I know was some language out there. You're saying that that was already where the House was at the beginning of session, you just waited to add it until the Senate was on board?
Yes, and we didn't make it public because we also, I know a lot of people thought that we hadn't done the work because we didn't make any language public, but it was really because we were still working together with the Senate on that, and I didn't want a version out there floating around with language to create confusion, and so we were ready with that language months ago.
We did adjust for the Senate.
Yes, and we did make some language adjustment, which is why, I'm glad that we did hold off, because we heard the Senate on some of the changes they wanted to make, and there was some substantial language change in that.
What were those?
It was around just the way some of the strict scrutiny piece of what we had written within that, and then also how we were going to identify pregnancy outcomes and how that's listed within the language. And so those pieces of it were adjusted based on Senate feedback.
Let's get left with the straw purchasers bill. That's another one Republicans have raised issues with, and there's two different versions of the binary trigger language, right?
We don't have the votes in the Senate to do those separately. So they'll travel together the way they passed the House and the way they passed the Senate. And my understanding is the conference committee has wrapped. So look at the conference committee, the reviser postings today, because there should be a slew of conference committee reports posted this afternoon and evening.
Are they closer to the Senate version of the binary trigger, or?
I don't know. That's a good Kelly Mueller question.
Can debate be ended if there's still an amendment at the desk?
Yes, so moving the previous question, I mean, last night, we just went to the vote, but moving the previous question dispenses with amendments and goes right to the vote on the bill. It's, it is kind of the nuclear option. What Republicans have done in terms of laying down on the railroad tracks is their version of a nuclear option. And so then we have two main tools. One is to go to the vote, and the other is to move the previous question. We have to move the previous question if there's a bill with amendments. We can just go to the vote if there's been a full and fair opportunity and the minority is clearly engaged in dilatory behavior. An entire caucus can be out of order, and they were last night.
Republicans added language related to body cam footage, if it's a public official, to the public safety bill, the judiciary bill. I don't know if you know this because you were on the floor, but would that possibly make it, or could that be worked out in conference or survive into a?
That's between the conferees. We because we adjourned quickly last night, did not appoint our conferees. But I understand that Chair Mueller, Chair Becker-Finn, and Chair Latz have had very good conversations, and I think they're about wrapped.
Are you gonna end at midnight on aim to end at midnight on Friday, Saturday too, or is it because this is the final push, you'll go later?
TBD, but I really think that it is not fair to the people of Minnesota. It's not fair to the front desk staff in particular, and it's not safe for members to be going all night. And so we have 36 hours. We can get our work done in 36 hours. We have about 20 conference committee reports and the ERA. So we have plenty of time to get the work done during the hours that most Minnesotans would be able to watch us.
Thanks, everyone.